Let's piss some people off.
Okay, let me ask you something. And I really want you to sit with it for a second. When you watched the halftime show, did you think I didn't like it? Or did you think this doesn't belong here? Because those are not the same thoughts. One is preference and the other one is ownership. And if just hearing another language for a few minutes made your body tense, like your chest got tight, your mood shifted, or you felt the urge to reject it out loud, then this episode isn't really about music. It's about what happens inside us when the world stops feeling familiar. Before I keep going, let me ask you for something honestly. If conversations like this matter to you, if you believe we need more depth, more truth, more humanity, this is how you help this program grow and this voice reach further. Like this episode, share it with someone you trust, hit the bell button so you don't miss the next one. These conversations don't move unless people carry them. Okay, so alright, sit with me. Let's unpack this. And I want to be really clear before people start filling in the blanks for me. I want to be very clear. I don't like politics. I stay away from politics. This is not me picking sides, parties, or agendas. This is about people, about psychology, about miseducation, about fear, about who gets to feel like they belong and who gets questioned. I'm recording this on Monday. By the time this airs on Wednesday, the Super Bowl might already feel like old news. But what came up after that performance didn't start on Sunday night. That halftime show was just a mirror, and a lot of people didn't like what they saw reflected. I also want to say this out loud before I go any further. This episode in particular didn't come together quickly. It actually took me a couple hours to sit with it, find the right angle, not an angle that was political, not an angle rooted in hate, and definitely not an angle that was about criticizing people. I really wanted to make sure I was coming at this from the right perspective, from a human perspective, from a place of understanding what gets triggered in people, why it gets triggered, and how easily things get misread when we don't slow down and look at the full picture. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about helping people see, maybe for the first time, what's actually happening underneath the reaction. Now, what did I feel last night on the Super Bowl? That night I was proud. I felt emotional, not dramatic, but deep, like something sitting in my chest. And then I felt heavy. Not because people didn't like the performance. Taste is taste. Not everyone likes reggaeton. And people from our own culture don't all like it either. What hurt was watching how fast people jump from not my thing, because you're allowed not to like it, not like the genre, to this doesn't belong. That jump right there tells you everything. And I want you to hear this clearly. It didn't make me angry. It made me honestly super sad, because it told me how many people still feel safest when the world stays small, and how threatening it feels when that world expands even a little. Before he even stepped on that stage, before Benito even came out, I was already praying. God knows I was praying so hard, quietly, because I know people. I know how fast things get twisted when people feel uncomfortable. I was hoping he didn't give anyone even a small excuse to say, this is anti-American, this is political, this doesn't belong here. I didn't want provocation, I wanted dignity. And regardless of how you feel about this music or his music, the way he showed up was intentional. and it was careful, and it was very aware. So let me explain the show like I would explain it to a friend, for those of you that don't understand what was going on. Because a lot of people saw visuals and dismissed them as random things, and they weren't. For example, the land. The show opened with land, earth, nature. For Puerto Ricans, land is not decoration. Land is memory. Land is labor. Land is survival. Sugarcane fields aren't pretty scenery. They hold generations of bodies, exhaustion, endurance. Starting there is saying, before the fame, before the spotlight, before the American stage, this is where we came from. If you don't know that history, it just looked aesthetic. If you do know it, it feels like respect. Now, the neighborhood, el barrio. Then the set starts feeling like a neighborhood. La casita, the little house, a block, because Puerto Rico isn't just a place, it's how people live together. Family spills beyond the house, music spills into the streets. Community is lived, it's not branded. That wasn't decoration, that was life. The Grammy moment, which a lot of people misunderstood with something else, when he handed the Grammy to the child, people were confused. But that moment wasn't about the child, it was about a legacy. It was saying, this doesn't end with me. That hits different when you come from a place where opportunity is not evenly distributed. Now the jibaro, which is and the baba hats, which is just the straw hats. That's not fashion. That's rural Puerto Rico. Working people. That's how we jibaros used to dress up as when we were working in the fields. Wearing that on the biggest stage in the world is saying, I didn't erase myself to be accepted. Now the blackouts, when you saw people hanging from power poles, the infrastructure and blackout references, that's not a metaphor. That's real life in Puerto Rico. Naming reality isn't political. It's totally honest, because that's something Puerto Rico faces every single day. Now naming the nations and why the order matters. Later in the performance, not at the beginning, he spoke first, God bless America, then the Americas, then last Puerto Rico. That order really matters. It felt like I see where I am, I see the world around me, and I see my home. And that is not rejection, that is belonging. Now, the core truth about what I really want to talk about today, which is the reaction that really triggered all of this. This is where I need you to stay with me, honestly, because it was about, the backlash wasn't about music, it was about centrality. When you grow up seeing your language everywhere, your culture everywhere, your experience treated as the default, you don't experience that as privilege. It just feels normal. So when something else takes center stage, even briefly, your nervous system reacts. And instead of saying, I don't understand this, people say, that doesn't belong here. Well, you know what? That's fear. Fear doesn't sound like fear. It sounds like, this isn't American. Why couldn't I understand it? Speak English. Go back to where you came from. Fear unexamined hardens into rejection, unfortunately. Language is emotional, not logical. Language isn't just communication. Language regulates the nervous system. When you hear your language everywhere, your body relaxes. You feel at home without thinking about it. Immigrants don't get that luxury. We do not get that luxury. We adapt early. We live in translation 24/7. We build the muscle of discomfort. People have always been centered, never had to build that muscle. So when Spanish shows up on the biggest stage in the country, some people don't feel curious. They feel disrupted. And if you don't know how to sit with disruption, you push it away. Now let's talk facts and calmly and clearly, because this is where a lot of people are simply wrong. The only people who naturally belong to this land were Native Americans. They spoke hundreds of languages: Navajo, Lakota, Cherokee, Choctaw, Hopi, and many more. They didn't speak English. English is not the original language of this land. Spanish isn't either. But here's where people get confused. When Spanish arrived in what is now the United States in the early 1500s, in case you guys didn't know. St. Augustine, Florida, founded in 1565, is the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in what is now the U.S. That means that Spanish was spoken on this land decades before English ever arrived. When English arrived, English didn't arrive until 1607 with the founding of Jamestown, Virginia. English became dominant through colonization and power, not because it was native to this land. Was English always the official language? No. For most of U.S. history, there was no official language at all. English was dominant by use, not by law. The idea that English has always been the official language is false and relatively recent in the country's timeline. People don't know this. So Spanish has been spoken in U.S. territory for over 400 years plus, and that's not my opinion. That's history. Do your research. So when people act like Spanish is foreign, or that English has always been the right language here, that's not patriotism. That's miseducation. And when someone says that, when they say they're like, go back where you come from, whether they realize it or not, is that we all have to leave this land. Because unless you're Native American, your family came from somewhere else. It's just that some people arrived earlier, and Native American didn't speak English. So that statement isn't strong. It's historically illiterate. And this is where I want to talk about something people say so casually without understanding the weight behind it. When people say things like, go back to where you came from, or if you love Puerto Rico so much, why don't you just go back? I don't think most people understand what they're really saying. Leaving your country, whether it's Puerto Rico or anywhere else, is not something you do because you want to. You don't leave because you don't love it. You leave because sometimes loving your home isn't enough to survive there. You leave because you want more for your children. You leave because you want opportunities that simply don't exist where you're from. You leave because you're trying to build, not to abandon. And that decision comes with grief, real grief, the kind people don't talk about. The kind that sits in your chest when you miss your land, your people, your language, your food, your way of life. But you also know you had to choose a bigger dream. Leaving your country is not betrayal. It's a huge sacrifice. And when people throw those comments around so lightly, it tells me they've never had to choose between loving where they come from and wanting more from what that place could offer to them. That pain is not exclusive of Puerto Rico or for Puerto Ricans. It's shared by immigrants everywhere, and dismissing that reality is another form of miseducation. And that's why it's so painful to hear people talk about immigrants like we're disposable, when in reality, we're holding so much of this country together. Now, let's talk about work, the part that people love to ignore. This country runs on immigrant labor, not supported by, but runs on. Immigrants are in construction, agriculture, healthcare, caregiving, hospitality, cleaning, food service, manufacturing, warehouses, deliveries. Entire industry would collapse without immigrants. And the wild part, the same people yelling, "This doesn't belong here," benefit from immigrant labor every single day. They eat food harvested by immigrants. They live in homes built by immigrants. They are cared for by immigrants. But when immigrants show up in culture, language, or visibility, suddenly it's a problem. And that contradiction is so freaking loud. Why people refuse to acknowledge this? Because acknowledging it would mean admitting something uncomfortable, that the version of America that they were taught was incomplete. Correcting miseducation requires humility, and humility feels like weakness to people who were thought certainly equal strength. So instead of learning, people double down, not because they're evil, but because they're afraid. And here's where we come to talk about the big voices. Now, we need to talk about leadership, not politically, but psychologically. When a major public figure with massive influence reacts to a cultural moment like this with mockery or dismissal, it does a real damage. Because big voices don't just share opinions, they authorize emotions. They tell millions of people, your fear is valid, your discomfort is correct. You don't need to examine yourself. Private insecurity becomes public certainty. That's how fear spreads. Leadership should calm people. When it amplifies fear, it poisons the collective mind. And that's why it's hard to respect the leadership that responds to difference with contempt. Not politically, but humanly. This is very personal for me because I was born Puerto Rican. I am married to a white man raised in the United States. When I met my husband, he didn't know what he knows now about our culture. Not because he was bad, because he was miseducated too. And it took years. It has taken years. Years of conversations, years of curiosity, years of unlearning. He learned because he wanted to understand. And today, even he felt sad seeing how much anger is out there. And you know what? I am so proud of him because that discomfort that he is feeling, that means growth. Now, how do I actually feel? I don't feel rage. I feel a lot of sadness because refusing to learn shrinks your world. America's not just English-speaking people. America is layered, complex, alive, and acknowledging that doesn't make you smaller. It makes you human. I want to end this message the way Benito did. At the end of the performance, he said something simple but very powerful. He said that the reason he was standing on that stage at the Super Bowl 60 was because he never stopped believing in himself. And that's the message I want to leave you with too. Never stop believing in yourself, especially when your language is questioned, especially when your culture is misunderstood. Especially when your presence makes people uncomfortable. Never stop believing in yourself. And remember this. Love will always be more powerful than hate always. The only people who actually make a difference in this world are those who are willing. Willing to learn, willing to question what they were taught, willing to grow. Because this world is so much bigger than one culture. Bigger than one language, bigger than one way of being American. There are so many ways to be human, so many ways to love, so many ways to belong. And when we shrink the world down to only what feels familiar, we don't protect ourselves. We are limiting ourselves. So choose curiosity, choose learning, choose love, because together We are America. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Love you bunches.
And remember, we're unfiltered, unapologetic, and unstoppable. That's that.